Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, mein Damen and Herren, senors, senoritas, boys and girls, comic book fans the world over, it's time once again for Ask Chuck Dixon, where you get to ask me, a working comic book professional of many decades, about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get to it. Comics Gatekeeper asks, I've recently been experimenting with trying to emulate the compressed storytelling of older comics, so definitely no wasted panels. Do you think comics might benefit from a few more books like that? Is pacing for the trade the new standard everyone just expects? Well, I mean, there's something to be said for, rapid fire, no BS, no, you know, no decompression in your stories. But at this point, it has kind of a retro feel because we've gotten used to the more what I'm going to call deliberate pacing. I mean, when it's written properly, a long form comic book story, be it a trade or a graphic novel, there's deliberate pacing. In other words, everything happens for a reason. Um, if the story slows down or the storytelling becomes more cinematic for a few pages, or there's a character moment, that's all to the good. That said, for too many writers, particularly in the 90s when, DC was directing all of us writers, and I believe Marvel was doing the same thing, to think about the trade, keep the trade in mind. In other words, don't have a 3-issue arc and a 4-issue arc, because that's not going to fit in a trade. Got to think in terms of 6 issues. So thinking about the trade in the writer's mind became writing for the trade, which I don't think was what the editors intended. And so comic writers started to think of how they wrote comics differently. Myself, I realized I still had to deliver a satisfying monthly read in each of the titles I was writing at the time. Nightwing, Detective Comics, Birds of Prey, Green Arrow, occasionally Catwoman. So I had to think in terms of, is each of these issues going to make the reader feel like they got their value? So is there enough action, suspense, humor, character moments? Is all that stuff included in each issue? But a lot of writers thought, well, I can just write this as one story, which means I can bear down on character moments for the first 3 issues, leading to my gigantic climax, and save all my big action for the end of the story. Well, that means you're going to have 3 to 4 issues with not a whole lot going on, just a lot of setup, setup, setup. And nobody wants to read setup, especially when they realize that's what they're reading is setup. If you're going to do that much setup, you better have one hell of a twist in the tail at the end of that story. I think my formula and the formula that other writers worked in was more conducive to joining the concept of a monthly comic with a trade, eventually a collected trade edition, which was to, knock them dead every issue, try to knock them dead every issue, and then have the whole thing read as a satisfying whole, which is a more complicated way of looking at it, which is why I think some lazy writers just decided that writing for the trade was kind of just gave them carte blanche to bore the reader every once in a while. It's something I never want to do. I never want to bore the reader because they'll stop reading. And if they stop reading, it means they didn't get to the end of my story. If they didn't get to the end of my story, it's very likely they won't pick up my next story. So don't bore the reader. Comics are an immediate experience. Every page, every panel must delight, must engage, must create tension or make the reader laugh. And quote unquote writing for the trade, as it was misinterpreted by so many other writers, is antithetical to that. That said, trade sales are king right now. That's where the money is. There's no money in monthly comics. Trade collections where it's at. So, you definitely have to consider the trade, But let's not leave the monthly behind, because you got casual readers out there, hopefully, who are still picking the comics up somewhere and reading them, or getting them on Comixology or some other site. And leave the trades and writing for the trades to the sophisticates, the imaginary comic book audience that every comic book company thinks they're creating for. Cecil Gilmore asks, what was the very first and last movie you saw in a theater? Can you elaborate on the experiences a little, like when it was, where it was, how much the tickets were, etc., if they were enjoyable or not? Also, can you throw in what you're watching, if anything, with the next show? What you're watching was a series I was doing here for a while, but I stopped doing it. Constraints of time. Switched over to what you're reading, which I was get a lot more hits on. Back at the old Waverly Theater, where I spent every single Saturday. And if they had a show on Sunday or Wednesday afternoons, I was there too. But this isn't where I saw my earliest movies. I hate to say it, but the very first movie I can remember seeing in a theater was Tammy and the Bachelor, 1957. We were away. We were on one of our many road trips through Virginia. My dad was, from the South, and a few summers we would pack up the car and head on down to Virginia so he could get a little feel of Dixie, And I guess my mom wanted him to take my two sisters and me, my older sisters, to the movies, and they picked the movie, and they picked Tammy and the Bachelor, and I don't remember a whole lot of it except the really syrupy theme song played over and over and over again in this movie. And I probably fell asleep during it, but I do remember that horrible song. Now the next movie that I do remember, it was a pick of my dad's. We went to the old 69th Street Theater in Upper Darby and saw The Horse Soldiers with John Wayne and William Holden, big John Ford Western. I do remember a lot of it. I do vividly remember seeing this movie, and one of my most vivid memories was my dad being a son of Dixie, but also being a John Wayne fan, was sort of torn because John Wayne was playing a Union officer during the Civil War, and my dad got a little emotional during, if you've ever seen the movie, the scene where the cadets from the Virginia Military Institute come out to face the seasoned Union troops and basically get slaughtered. And he also did not like the sequence in which the Confederates pile off of a train that is pulled into town, only to be gunned down. So he didn't care for those parts of the movie. But like I said, he was torn. Huge John Wayne fan. Now, when I was a kid, I remember the price of movies, because I'd have to, my mom would give me the money, or I'd have to use money from Christmas or whatever to go to the movies. And I do recall that a movie ticket was 35 cents at the Saturday matinee, unless it was Disney, and then it was 50 cents because, Walt had to get his piece. I think the rentals on Disney movies was higher. And the Disney movies were popular, but that said, the longest lines ever I saw at the old Waverly Theater were whenever they would have a Three Stooges movie. And lines around the block, like worried you're not going to be able to get in. And they just charged 35 cents for them. So that was my kid economics. And you could see me standing in a line like this every Saturday. The Waverly. Now, Saturday matinees, they're gone. There's nothing like it anymore. It was all kids. Now, today, if you go to a Saturday matinee at the theater, it's kids, it's adults. If it's a kid's movie, there's an uncle or aunt or mom or dad or older sibling bringing the kids. But back when I was a kid, it was just kids. There was no escorts. There was no chaperones. They just packed that theater with a bunch of screaming kids who were just high on the concept that they weren't at school. And just unruly crowd. We would run down the aisles, scream and yell, jump over the seats, throw stuff at the screen. And the movie, unless we actually set fire to the place, the ushers really didn't do much. They just stood in the lobby and prayed that it would be over soon. And but I just remember lots of screaming and yelling and running around, and particularly if the movie was boring. And sometimes you had to think the movie theater was asking for it, because they showed us a movie about the Amish one time, and it's a wonder we didn't burn the theater down. Another time they showed us The Ugly American with Marlon Brando. This was a Saturday matinee, and that was pandemonium. That was pandemonium. We did not like that movie. We found it so tiresome and boring that we just basically acted up the whole time. It was like, packing a building full of chimpanzees. But those days are gone. You go to Saturday matinee now and the kids are quiet and polite and their parents are looking at their phones. And it's just not the same. Now, if you ever want to see what it was like, the movie matinee, the Joe Dante movie matinee, captures it perfectly. Matinee is one of those rare movies that captures like a moment in time. If you've ever seen it, it takes place during the days of the Cuban Missile Crisis, which as a kid I vividly remember. And it captures that moment, that sense of doom that we might all die tomorrow in a nuclear conflagration with the Soviets. And it also captures the pandemonium and craziness and the anticipation and the wild excitement that kids would work up at a Saturday matinee. Now, that said, the last movie I saw in the theater was the second Thor movie, which I realize now was like 13 years ago. My kids grew up to the point where, they could go to the movies themselves. They didn't need me to take them. And I just stopped going to the movies. I got my own super audio set up and on a big screen, and my Blu-ray and 4K and all the rest, and I'm happy with that. So no more movie theaters for me. I didn't even go see Napoleon, which I thought I might. So there you go. Ryan Wilson, is the Marvel method used anymore at the big two, or did they stop using it? Maybe it evolved to something else? When the Marvel method was being used, did DC start writing their comics using that method because of Marvel's success? The Marvel method is, for those who don't know, it's not full script. A full comic book script looks very much like a screenplay. It goes panel by panel. All the dialogue, sound effects, art descriptions are all there. Everything's broken down in words for the artist to follow or to use as a springboard. A lot of artists make changes, and I'm cool with that. As long as the comic looks good, as long as they make me look like a genius, I'm fine with whatever they do. But when Marvel began to expand its titles and everything else, the workload fell on Stan Lee and his brother Larry, and the workload was too much. There were too many titles coming out. And so Stan wisely lent on his artists to do more of the storytelling and more of the story concepts. So Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko were pretty much left up to their own devices to direct the comics they were working on, be it Fantastic Four, Thor, the Hulk, Doctor Strange, Amazing Spider-Man. And so they were really the driving creative force. And then Stan, let's not take anything away from Stan. Stan would add the dialogue. And in addition to all the other duties that he had. And, I think Stan was doing more heavy lifting on titles like Patsy and Hetty and Millie the Model. If you read them, they are, he wasn't leaving, Stan Goldberg and those other artists. He wasn't asking them to do what Jack and Steve were doing. Mainly because Jack and Steve were passionate about the work that they were doing. They really only needed some guidance, and they really only needed some help with dialogue. Otherwise, they were left to their own devices, which left Stan more time to concentrate on the other titles. And that's the reason the Marvel method. And the Marvel method is basically just a plot. It might be 2 pages. It might be 3 pages. Just generally describing what's going on. There's no dialogue. There's no nothing. All of that is left up to the artist. In the case of Steve Ditko and Spider-Man, I don't even think there was that much. I think Steve would suggest, what about a villain like this, a villain like that? What if this villain came back? And Stan would be, okay, yeah, go do that. With Jack, it was, I want the Fantastic Four to be doing this. What if they met God? What if Doctor Doom came back? Yeah, Jack, go do that. And Stan was blessed with talented, earnest, driven, enthusiastic creators, and that's how the Marvel method was created. Now, DC largely looked down on Marvel in this period. They thought that they couldn't understand why Marvel comics were selling. They thought Marvel comics looked amateurish and sloppy, and they weren't as uptight as DC comics. They thought that Marvel comics were of lower quality. They couldn't see what I saw as a kid. So Marvel comics were exciting, and the stuff was new, and it was new characters, and it was a new approach. The characters were more relatable. In some cases they weren't as well drawn as DC comics, but I wasn't at that time looking for drawing. Although absolute devotee of Steve Ditko, I idolized the guy, and Ditko was doing the best work of his career those early days on Marvel, and Jack was just pouring the stuff out. I mean, Jack was doing like the equivalent of 5 monthlies for years at Marvel. So DC did not adopt anything Marvel was doing, and when they did try to ape Marvel, try to be hipper and cooler, the end result is what always happens when older guys try to be hip and cool. It was an embarrassment. Even as a kid, I remember I thought go-go checks on DC comic cover borders were like the most cynical form of pandering. Like, these guys are clueless. At least Stan sounded like a Las Vegas lounge lizard was, trying to be cool in a way. So yeah, DC never adopted it. For a long time would not recognize what Marvel was doing and the value of it, and so they kept on doing things the way they do. Now in the 70s, particularly when artists started coming over from Marvel, the writers are moving back and forth, editors are moving back and forth. Yeah, there were a number of writers at DC who were used to writing in the Marvel method and kept doing that. But guys like Doug Mensch, who had done a lot of work at Marvel, I think he always worked full script. And when I started working at Marvel, they encouraged you to use the Marvel method. Why, I don't know. Because everybody can't be Stan and Jack, or Steve and Jack, Steve and Stan, or any combination of those three. So why would you expect anybody else to be able to work at that level? But I quickly convinced all of my editors to let me go full script because it's a better end result. And in the end, the artists are usually the ones who said, "Yeah, I prefer the full script. I'm not having to think about all of this stuff. Chuck's working it out. He's blocking the story out for me, but leaving me room, for what I do as well. Being flexible, and I'm all about collaboration. It's a collaborative medium. The writing and the art are equally important. So there you go. Yeah, DC did not want to adapt anything Marvel did because they just looked down their nose at them. Andrew Schweitzer recently read a list ranking every year one Batman comic. Your Detective Comics annual from 1995, along with a number of other stories, made the list. In particular, they noted the story, quote, has just the right amount of camp, action, and most importantly, it's somehow missed by plenty of writers, riddles. I'm really curious about how to write a good Riddler-esque story. Do you start at the end with the solution and work your way backwards to form the question, or is it another formula entirely? Every Riddler story is, and every mystery story where the resolution. I tell this to people all the time. They come up with the concepts for a mystery. What if this? And it's generally some variation on Rear Window. What if somebody accidentally, taped the murder? What if somebody accidentally saw a murder from a Zeppelin? Whatever. And it's like, okay, but what's the mystery? What at the end? What do we learn that we didn't know before that clues us in. And most people don't do that. They don't know where to go from that inciting incident. That's why mysteries had to be worked backwards. And, I was really pleased to see the Riddler annual on that list. Or I should say Detective Comics annual on that list. Yeah, Riddler stories, you got to start at the end. You got to know, you got to figure out what crime the Riddler wants to commit and then write riddles leading to it. And ideally, and this is the tough part, ideally leading to the crime if you answer the riddles correctly, or leading you away from the crime, possibly into a trap if you answer the riddles incorrectly, which means you're going to have a boatload of riddles with two possible answers. And that's heavy lifting. And this is why most writers don't include riddles in their Riddler story. They just sort of concentrate on something else. They make the story, quote unquote, character driven, which means they didn't bother with the plot at all. In this year one annual, basically retelling the Riddler's origin, I dealt with a lot of character stuff, but I didn't forget to put in the Riddler crimes. I was helped by the fact that because it was a year one story, I had carte blanche to go back through the Riddler's history and pick and choose stories that I wanted to use. And in those stories, the template had already been worked out, probably by Bill Finger. So I didn't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting on that one, as I did on the Riddler arc that Graham and I did together, which took me about 2 years to get together in my head, how to do a complex, riddle-driven crime story featuring the Riddler. So yeah, you got to start at the end. Any mystery, you've got to start at the end. You got to. My wife the other day told me this really cool fact she found. This really cool medical fact. And I said, "Well, there's your whodunit mystery. There's your nobody leave your room ending. You would write." You would know that as the reader or as the writer, you would know this medical fact that the reader wouldn't. And there's your mystery. How did this person die? We can't figure it out. And the resolution comes on the final pages. Work backwards. Yvonne Magila. Speaking about prose novels, do you only write things you like to read, or do you write only things that you like to write? Is there a genre that you really appreciate that you feel you cannot write? Not necessarily because you are not able for any reason, like I appreciate this and I don't want to think as a writer about it, or whatever reason you have. It's your show. Yeah, I mean, I really like nautical fiction, historical period nautical fiction. I wouldn't ever try to write a serious nautical fiction novel because I don't sail. I'm not even a particularly good swimmer. Most of those novels are written by people with a lot of experience. They were either former Navy personnel or they've been sailing enthusiasts or the rest. So while I enjoy reading that stuff, I wouldn't try. Another genre which I would never try is espionage. It just doesn't interest me. That's a genre I wouldn't write because it doesn't interest me. I find most espionage stories, except I really like Alan First's novels. They're spy stories set in World War II, and they're excellent. But there's a purpose to them. I really, really hate. Well, I never read James Bond. James Bond's just, pulp adventure stuff. Well written pulp adventure stuff, but nonetheless, not really true espionage stories. I don't like modern espionage stories, largely, especially Cold War ones, because there's this, Weltschmerz, why are we doing this? Aren't we all the same? And it's all a game. I don't like that stuff. That's cynical and pointless to me. These world weary guys shuffling through the rain in Berlin, just okay. Smoking too many cigarettes, drinking too much wine. Yeah, I get it. I have no interest. But that said, I've tackled genres that were a challenge to me, genres I like, and every time you write a new genre, you've got to immerse yourself in it. You got to do a lot of reading, you got to do a lot of research. You got to make sure you got all your ducks in a row. But I appreciate the challenge. I like doing that. So, but yeah, largely historical fiction. I mean, I when I did Bad Times, I got to play with stuff. I got to write nautical fiction in Bad Times. It was a time travel story, and the events were being seen by people contemporary to us. So they didn't need to use the language and the proper terminology and everything else. I mean, if they're on a Phoenician war galley, they don't know what to call anything. Right? So I can't get anything wrong because my characters don't know. So how would I know? And my characters don't know because I don't know. So, but I kind of got to write a pastiche of nautical combat in a couple of the Bad Times novels, which was cool. And also, the time travel aspect allowed me to write, uh, you know, what is, what is essentially science fiction mashed up with historical adventure, which was a lot of fun for me. Speaking of novels, I got a new one out, Levon Scourge. It's the 12th novel in the Levon Cade series. If you want to check that out. Also, if you have subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, please do so now. You're really helping to grow this channel and bring more attention to it, more listeners and watchers, and more of your awesome questions. Liam Connolly. Recently, I learned about DC's Bloodlines event after reading Hitman. From an outsider's perspective, it seemed like a desperate attempt to, quote, get with times by aping Image Comics characters and all their worst traits. Simultaneously, it felt like DC was in sort of weird self-loathing phase over its own characters and place in the market. However, I'd hate to discredit any genuine passion or hard work that went into the New Bloods. So I was wondering if you had any insight into the office atmosphere at the time surrounding the event or the attitude of the creators and executives involved. What did they think of the storyline and characters? Yeah, Bloodline was an annual event that went across all of the annuals, and basically it was a sort of what they call in TV what they call it, a soft pilot or a hidden pilot, where you have an episode of your TV show and it seems to feature someone other than the lead character for most of its running time. And what that is it's a soft pilot. It's a way to do a pilot without spending the extra money to do a pilot. You're doing it as part of the budget for a regular show. I thought Bloodlines was the same thing. Rather than launch a bunch of new number ones, they were going to try these characters out in these annuals featuring established characters. And it was a good idea. I mean, everybody was looking to create new characters. You realized that sales were starting to fall on the iconic legacy titles. And this was an attempt to, take the temperature of the audience to see if they'd be open to any new characters. The problem for me, and I complained about it a lot, was that if we did create a new line of characters, they would all share the same origin. As I put it, they were bit by a giant space flea. They were, attacked by these aliens, and instead of dying, they were given powers through, I guess, recombinant DNA or whatever. And I thought, this is not an idea with legs. This is not an idea that's going to take us anywhere good. And it didn't. Most of these characters failed. Now, I mean, I enjoyed writing my two. I wrote Detectives Comic 1 that Jim Ballant drew, featuring Geist, the Twilight Man. And then I wrote this Bloodlines, Earth Plague, with Kieran Dwyer did the awesome job on the art. It was a Robin annual, and I introduced these characters as Cyber Rats, and I managed to get a miniseries greenlit with these characters, but they never went much further than that, except to make some guest appearances in Young Justice. I think later on they showed up in Robin. Not sure, can't remember, but they weren't going anywhere. We didn't get inundated with letters saying we want more Cyber Rats. I think the only character that came out of this, the other end, that had any kind of endurance was Hitman. That clicked with readers and enjoyed. I don't know how long it ran. It was around for a few years, right? I don't know how long a run it had. But yeah, generally failed. And, I think it was kind of a Hail Mary pass to just create a bunch of new characters without without the having to launch new series, which in the end was economical, but because they all shared the same origin, I just thought, you know, I think that's the main reason it didn't work. I think there should have been some other way of introducing these characters. I don't know how. And of course, I'm not being paid to figure it out, so I'm not going to bother. Creeper weirdo. I tried to look up collections for G.I. Joe, but the ones I found were crazy expensive. If I want to get into G.I. Joe, where do I start? Yeah, I don't follow the prices of back issues on G.I. Joe, and where to start on G.I. Joe? Oh my God, it's this decades long franchise with hundreds of issues from different companies and different artists and different permutations and all the rest of it. Where does one start? And I'm sorry that back issues and collections are so expensive. That's something I don't understand about comics, especially with print on demand. Why everything can't just be in print all the time? Why can't this stuff just be available in some sort of inexpensive edition? Why have these properties like G.I. Joe sitting on a shelf somewhere not being published while the back issue prices and the prices on eBay go up and up and up? Obviously, there's a demand for it, or the prices wouldn't be going up. But that's a question for another day, or somebody who knows more about than I do. That said, if I was, regardless of price or whatever, if I was to start with G.I. Joe, I would start with G.I. Joe Special Missions. This is the Larry Hama, Herb Trimpe run. This was a spin-off title that came about because the G.I. Joe book was Marvel's #1 best-selling comic. It was a phenomenon when it came out, so they spun off this second title, and which are largely standalone adventures, largely B-team G.I. Joe members who didn't get enough limelight in the regular title, and they are just snappy, fast-paced military fantasies, and as good as Larry's writing is in general in G.I. Joe, I think these are standouts. I think he really got into this title even more than he did the regular monthly, which is something to say because he really was into the regular monthly and still is. He's still producing scripts for ongoing G.I. Joe Real American Hero comics after all these years. Hey, a twin spin for Creeper Weirdo. Why not? Is there any independent comic that you love but you can't explain why? Well, there's not any one that I can't explain why, but I'll tell you, I'm a big fan of Jay Stevens' work. He does these comics that, sort of retro throwback kids comics that are kind of written for adults. But in some cases, truly written for adults. But in some cases, they're kid friendly enough. But I think that their prime audience are adults, and I just love his art style. I love his sensibilities. I love his. I just like everything about them. They're fun to read, and he has a new. I just discovered this the other day, thanks to one of you folks out there emailing me. That he has a thing at Kickstarter. I'll try to provide the link below. It's a Kickstarter campaign that brings back Gold Key Comics, and he does a series of 6 comic books featuring Figgy Furthermore, Spirit Guide Dog, which I don't know anything about, but I want to know more. And the pages look terrific. It's a throwback retro kids comic feel to it, and I can't wait to read these. I haven't been this excited about a Kickstarter campaign in a while, and I'm delighted with when anybody can use their craft to their fullest extent. And here Jay is apparently given the freedom to just go wild, and it's a successful campaign. It's funded, so it's going to happen. But if you like this kind of stuff, I suggest you go take a peek at it to see somebody working. At the height of their powers on a project they so obviously love. Joshua Ignatowski. It's shaping up to be some exciting times we're living in with Eric July having released his new Ripperverse service. Could you please get your perspective as soon as both a seasoned comics pro and a Ripperverse insider as to how Ripperverse will positively impact the comics industry for both the present and the future and the opportunities it opens up. Well, I can't say a lot about it because it's early days and we're still figuring stuff out. It's on a project by project basis. Um, my impressions are, and I think they are shared impressions with Eric, that it's a kind of a Eclipse Comics or Epic Comics creator-owned deal. But Eric's laid out the terms in broad strokes to me, and he's improved upon the Eclipse deal. It's certainly an improvement upon deals offered by other companies, including Image, and beyond fair. And I've already got a project lined up with him. I'm probably already said more than he would want me to say, but it's an exciting time. You're right, it is an exciting time because this is going to give a lot of creators who are who haven't reached an audience, or they're underemployed, or who have an idea and they've had trouble bringing it to market. This will give them that boost. This will give them that venue, and I see big things for it. I see big things for it, and I think it'll be hugely successful. And also, the most exciting part for me is reaching new readers, getting this stuff out in front of new readers. Because right now, Eric has he's got the juice, he's got the push, he's got the lightning in the bottle. Something's happening there at Ripperverse that's going to revolutionize how comics are done, or at least evolve how comics are done in this country, past the malaise we've been in for decades. And I'm excited for it, and I will be a part of it, and hopefully a big part of it down the road. It's a creative goldmine, potentially. David Jordan, do you think with the Death of Superman storyline, it would have been better if they had Superman and Darkseid kill one another than to have invented a big unstoppable monster? Do you know why they decided to make a new monster be the one to take him down instead of an established character? I guess they wanted a new villain. I like your idea of Superman and Darkseid killing one another. That would have been cool. Not to take anything away from Death of Superman, it's a marvelously constructed, huge, franchise-wide event that enormously successful. It's one of the driving reasons we did Nightfall, because DC wanted the same kind of same level of big blockbuster event for Batman. But in creating Doomsday, I don't know. I guess I don't know if they had any plans for him after this. It doesn't seem like it, does it? Because they didn't put the kind of work into building the character. I mean, he's a big brute. He's a monster, and there's no relating to him. There's no. I mean, I'm not taking anything away from the story. It's an incredible saga, and it's very exciting and suspenseful, and lots of action and lots of heart to it. But I don't know why they didn't spend more time on the bad guy. And this is something that drove us when we did Nightfall, and I was the biggest proponent of. Denny wanted a new villain as well. We really needed a new villain for Nightfall, but I was the one who was most concerned with the fact that for Nightfall to work, Bane would have to be adopted by the readers. They would have to like this character, and that was my biggest concern. And so that's why Graham and I sweated so hard to make this guy interesting, to make this guy a character that the readers would want to see again, that he would be, he would join that rogues gallery of arch nemesis or nemesi, or however you pluralize that word. And, because we didn't want happening to him what happened to Doomsday, which was Doomsday was pretty much, retired, forgotten at the end of that whole storyline. Jason Manning, I'm wondering if you have any recommendations for comics that might suit a small child. My 4-year-old son knows how to read, a benefit of homeschooling. Good for you. and I'm considering introducing him to the medium. Well, I can tell you, I'm no seer, but I can tell you what my uh, kids liked to read, and you kind of have to like show them everything or expose them to as many comics as you want and let them choose, rather than say, "Hey, read this; it's good for you." You know how that's going to go over. Uh, so. Um, my oldest really didn't get that much into comics. He read them, but he didn't really get that much into it. But my youngest did, and he really liked Mutts, the comic strip Mutts, from a young age. And we, my I say we homeschooled. My wife homeschooled. I did nothing uh, except cry over flashcards. Anyway, the my wife credits Mutz with not only helping my youngest learn to read, something I thought he would never do, but she stuck with it. Um, but he's an enthusiastic reader. He reads a lot to this day. And if you know anything about educating kids, if you know anything about reluctant or difficult readers, you can teach them to read, but you ain't never going to teach them to like to read. And somehow my wife did that. She taught our son to read, and he likes to read. He's got a room full of books just like I do, and our house full. I have a house full of books. He has a room full of books, and you know he's a voracious reader of comics and novels and all the rest. So yeah, Mutts, and Mutts, it's stories. The comic strip. It's like little stories served in little tiny portions. The characters are cute. It's not pandering at all. It's a very smartly written strip, but there's not any like difficult concepts to overcome and all the rest of it. And the characters have their own way of speaking. It's just the fun. And my youngest really was attached to Mutts. Another thing he really liked as he got older was Gru. And yeah, Gru runs around, swinging swords and stuff like that. But it's kid friendly. There's no death or real destruction. It's slapstick humor. And yeah, my son really still, as a grown man, still is a big fan of Gru. The one suggestion I might make is Cinebooks is publishing the Marsupilami books, and again, like Mutts, features a cute animal. Kids love cute animals, be they boys or girls, and um, they're fun. Once again, they don't pander to the kids. The story concepts aren't that complex. Um, and there's lots of action and funny characters, and a lot of it you can follow. It's so cinematically told that even for an early reader, they can follow the story even if some of the words are either beyond them or they figure it out in context. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of comics helping kids to read is they're reading words and then there's context. The visuals are the context. So I remember when I was reading comics, I was able to figure out, oh, I figured what this word means based on what's going on in the picture. And I really think comics should be used more as an educational tool for kids. I would stay away from any of the graphic novels and stuff that are particularly aimed at kids. You see them on end caps at Target and at Sam's Club and places like that, and because they're really bad. I recently looked through a bunch of Five Nights at Freddy and stuff like that. And I realize these things are popular. They're not good comics. There's no backgrounds. They're poorly drawn. I don't, man. I mean, if these are bestsellers, what the hell are DC and Marvel doing? They could create better stuff than this. They could be competing in that market, but they don't. So yeah, I would stay away from, what passes for graphic novels to kids now, because it's pretty miserable material. I mean, you want your kids reading good stuff. Speaking of good stuff, why not check out My Sister Suprema? It's a comic aimed at kids by me and Anthony Gonzalez Clark, and it doesn't, we're not pandering. We're telling a fun, action-packed story. And yeah, it's My Sister Suprema, and your little boy Mike. I don't want to read about a girl. But the story's really about Randy, her little brother, and his frustrations with having an older sister who is a superhero. And you don't even have to buy anything. You can try it out at ArcTunes. Follow the link here. Go to ArcTunes and check out a whole bunch of episodes of My Sister Suprema. If you like it a lot, you can go over to Amazon and by issue 1. Issue 2 is being put together now. So you can have print versions too. How about that? Power of Grayskull. I'm an aspiring creator with several characters, titles, and stories that I really believe could be successful. But I have no idea how to actually copyright these things. Internet searches seem to show only what appear to be very sketchy copyright help services. Of course they do. Everybody's got their hand out on the internet that appear to be just scams to get at your wallet. Yes, sir. Yes, indeed. You do have the power of Grayskull. I have also asked everyone I know who I believe would have said knowledge, and the only answer I get was hire a copyright lawyer. So not much help there either. How does one go about copywriting works of fiction by themselves? There must be a way. Any insight would be appreciated. Yeah, I mean, as a creator, you don't want to be dealing with paperwork and copyright. You damn sure don't want to be dealing with lawyers. And every single one of those copyright services is a scam. You know, in the 50% of the time, you will end up with copyright. 50% of the time, who knows who ends up with the copyright. And it'll cost you money. It'll cost you more money than you need to spend to get your stuff copyrighted. There's a number of ways to copyright things. There is what is called the common law copyright. And this has a long history in comic books. In fact, when I did research, I didn't realize how long history this had. If you have an idea that's just burning a hole in you, if you're having one of those ideas where it's like, boy, if I don't get this copyrighted, somebody's going to do it before me. It is so high concept and wonderful that I got to get it out there. You can publish what's called an ashcan edition. And these are editions that, you know, they're black and white covers, as you can see here. And it contains all the material that you want to copyright, the characters, situations, all the rest of it. You know, it could be your first issue of your comic or whatever. Certainly your title, all the rest of it. And you publish a few hundred of these. You know, you can go over to, Kinko's and publish your ashcan comic, and you offer it for sale, and maybe you sell a few through the mail, or you sell a few through the mail. Listen to me. Or you go on the internet and sell a few, give them away to friends, sell them at a convention, whatever. You get them out there in the market, or just take them and throw them all away, except for the 2 copies that you send to the Library of Congress. And as long as your copyright is there with the copyright, the year, your full name, it's copyrighted. You're protected. It's a common law copyright. It can be challenged in court, generally not successfully. But all you got to do is you got to get the date on there, and so you're ahead of the market with your absolutely brilliant idea, so that it doesn't get stolen by somebody else. And that's a common law copyright. And other than the cost of the printing, it doesn't cost you anything. And you can see, as you see, it's been used for decade after decade in the comic book industry to basically get to market before everybody else and get your stuff copyrighted. Now, the other way is to go to the U.S. Government Copyright Office. And you can go online and you can copyright the work online. There's a nominal fee. I copyrighted something recently, and I can't remember how much it costs, which is an indication of how little it costs, because I don't remember. And you go there, and they basically send you a piece of paper saying, yep, you're copyrighted. And you're all set, and you are off to the races. And that's probably your best protection. Another quick and dirty way that doesn't cost much, I think it's like $25, is to contact the Writers Guild of America. Now, if you're on the East Coast, you want the Writers Guild of America East. And if you're on the West Coast, guess what? You want the Writers Guild of America West. And you either go on their website or call them on the phone and say, I have a property that I wish to be protected by the Writers Guild. And they give you directions, and it's as simple as can be. You take your property, be it a comic book, a movie treatment, a screenplay, whatever, you put it in an envelope, you seal it in a second envelope, and you send it to the Writers Guild with the form you filled out and your payment, and they date that envelope, and they put it away in their files, and I think they hold it for 10 years. And so if anybody ever tries to steal your idea or challenge you or whatever, you just turn to the Writers Guild and say, hey, this guy's ripping me off. And you know what? You don't have to do anything after that. The Writers Guild pulls that file out and says, hey, he handed this and we registered this 2 years ago. So that lying son of a bitch, we're going to take him to court. And the Writers Guild handles it from there and protects your property. So there's a number of ways to do it. That, don't go to a lawyer, don't go to a service, go directly to the government, go directly to the Writers Guild, or do the ash can yourself. And if you do the ash can, if you do the common law copyright, it's best to follow it up with an actual copyright. But those are the quick and dirty ways to get this done without spending a fortune. And good luck. You sound like you've got a lot of faith in your project, and that's all you need. All you need is that what I always say, and what I have, is that mix of confidence and ignorance, and you can move mountains. So I kid you not. I am not having fun at your expense. That's what a creator needs. You can't think about the odds against you. You just got to go for it, because you never know that you might create the next big thing. So okay, hey, free comics. Yeah, there's free comics. I think it was Creeper Weirdo asking about G.I. Joe. How do you get into G.I. Joe? Well, here's some G.I. Joe comics about some real G.I. Joes that you can get for free. And all you do is you go to ausa.org and look for Medal of Honor graphic novels. And these are a series of graphic novels. They're actually 8-page comics by me and some top talents. P.J. Holden, Wayne Van Zant, Jeff Isherwood, Andrew Paquette, guys like that. The top drawer, excellent artists. And they tell the story of Army soldiers, United States Army soldiers, who have won the nation's highest medal. And these stories these guys are true life superheroes, jaw-dropping stories. I love working on these just because of the research I get to do and the stories I hear about these amazing individuals who just worked miracles on the battlefield and really proved the old dictum that, the right man in the right place can change history. Hey, if you have questions, suggestions, whatever, you send them along to me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. brunobookstore@gmail.com. It is the most reliable way to get a hold of me and make sure that your question gets asked and answered right here on Ask Chuck Dixon. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching, liking, subscribing, spreading the news, sharing this site and in this channel. And I'll see all of you down the road.